What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning back into the channel. Today, wanted to bring you all along as I work on a built-in in our home. I've done, several things like this project in plenty of customers' homes. I did a couple next to our fireplace when we had moved in. This particular room is what we call kind of the bonus room in our house. It's just kind of an everything room. There's a pretty good sized desk in that room that I made out of butcher block that the kids do homework at. I do channel work at. There's a TV in there. My wife crafts in there. So it just kind of became a bonus room for us. It's off of the living space portions of our house. So the room used to actually be open to what is kind of the kitchen slash dining area. The wall to my right had about an 8-foot opening going into the rest of the house. It was a very strange layout. We closed that off when I did all the other remodel work to the house because we wanted to extend the kitchen, and I feel like this is how the house should have been built in the first place. But it's up until this point, it's always just been kind of a catch-all room, and I wanted some more organized space, storage space to clean things up, and just to give us a little bit more function. So I had looked at multiple pictures online. I had just Googled different images of bookcase built in, reading nooks, things like that, and had thought what I could do with this window that was better utilization than what it was before. Before, there was basically a small TV cabinet or bookcase underneath of the window, the TV set on top. The shades pretty much stayed pulled to all the time. We didn't really utilize the window. I thought it would be a neat place for myself or the girls to be able to read a book or just hang out and give us a lot more storage space. So I wanted to do this bookcase built in. What you're basically seeing me do right now is score the baseboard, remove all of the trim from that area. We had already previously moved all of the belongings out of that area so that I could work, and I'm just getting it ready at this stage for the cabinetry and things that I'm going to build to go in. So here, obviously, I'm outside. I'm in the driveway. I am marking this 4x8 sheet of plywood out for what will be all of the wood that I will make the cabinet boxes out of. This is a sheet, like I said, a 4x8. It's a laminated pine that's 3/4 of an inch thick, and I am going to rip it down to what is typically considered nominal 1x12 length or width. I'm sorry. Which would be about 11.5, and that gives me a little bit of room for any error in cut or my saw blade width. So I'll wind up with a pretty thin piece left over. And two, if I ever had to work back with it with some type of 1x material, it's already at that same width. But this pine, like I said, it's a laminated pine. You can pick it up at Home Depot. That's where I tend to buy mine from. And it's got one side that's truly finished and would be considered more of an A grade or clear. There's no knots in it. And then the side that I'm working from that you can see is more of the rough side of the wood. If you're going to use that side for a finished area, you probably want to be a little selective of where you cut out of, and know that you're going to have to do some work to fill and sand those areas if it's going to be painted or showing. I just try to lay mine out to where I'm not utilizing that side near as much for my finished side. A lot of people kind of may naysay how I cut. Obviously, this step platform is not the best platform to cut from. I've always worked this way, right or wrong. I kind of just do what works for me at the time. I don't do a lot of stuff to set up sawhorses and try to cut from those. I don't like working with large sheets of material and table saws. I don't have a large outfeed table, like a cabinet shop would have to run full 4x8 sheets in. I just find it a lot easier to work with a circular saw. Oftentimes, if the yard's in pretty good shape, I'll just set the depth of my blade and work on large sheets flat on the ground and cut into the yard. Um, I know not a lot of people may do that, but I'm, it's basically more of an efficiency thing for me. My time's usually pretty limited when I'm working on stuff, and things could change. A kid may need to go somewhere, or I might have to stop what I'm doing. And so I try to drag out as minimal as possible. Right or wrong, like I said, that's just how I work. Um, I feel like you do what works for you. If you want to set up a lot of equipment and sawhorses and everything else, that's up to you. Um, so what you're basically seeing me work on right here is I am installing what will be the bottom shelf of the cabinet. The top of the cabinet is closest to the camera, and I'm using a trim screw to screw it together. I find working with them to be a little bit better than using my nailer. I've used a nailer in the past. It's just not strong enough for holding it together while I'm doing all the other work to build the cabinetry. So like I said, I prefer these trim screws. They have a really small head on them if you need to fill it back in, and one of the screws winds up in a finished area, but they're just a lot stronger as far as building it and carrying it around. So this will be the very top of the cabinet, and when it goes up against the ceiling, I've made the boxes so that they're not completely tight to the ceiling, so that way it gives me room to get them in the house. And there's going to be a piece of 1x4 that will face out the entire front of all of the plywood edges. So I kind of had predetermined that height that I wanted from the ceiling, that I could put a piece of 1x4 flush with this top shelf and still cover with a piece of 4¼ inch crown, which you'll see me put in shortly. Here I am cutting down a small piece of 1x2 that will just basically, or it's a 2x2 is what it is, but it's 1.5" by 1.5". But it will go in the very top, and I'll utilize it to screw the cabinet top back to the wall, so that way I get a good secure attachment to the wall at the very top of the cabinet. Here I'm just sliding it into the corner that it's going to go in. I'm using my oscillating saw or vibrating saw, however you want to call it, and cutting the existing baseboard, and you'll see how that bottom shelf will fit flush with the baseboard that's already in the house, which is, like I said, 1x6. And then whenever I finish out the cabinets, that baseboard will just come across and basically wrap out all of my built-in, which is what basically truly gives it that built-in look, is when it looks like it's always been there. This is just more of a repeat process of what you saw me do on the left side. I'm going to cut and remove the base and slide it into the corner, put some screws into the corner stud in the wall, and try to get it secured back. I had a little bit of a tough time putting these in because the corners weren't exactly true, as most homes are. They're never perfect, so you have to work with what you have. Here I am starting to build what will be the connector box that's going to go across the top of the window and go from side to side and connect the left and the right cabinet boxes, or bookcases or shelves, whatever you want to say. I'm trying to figure out here, you'll probably see me pause a couple times, I'm thinking about the layout. I didn't want to make this long connector shelf really too short, because I wanted to still be able to get a decent sized book on it, or an item that we wanted to display. So it ended up being about 10 inches tall, but it will go up higher than where I had planned on the trim running across my other two shelves. So you'll see shortly what I mean by that when I run the piece of 1x4 across completely across the room. The top of this shelf is actually higher than my left and right shelving units are, and obviously I put a board in the middle. I wanted the look of it to be completely open all the way across, but I thought it might be a little bit too flimsy in the middle without having some sort of a board in the middle for support. I also apologize for how dark the video is in this part of the video. I found this out shortly that the camera is just not picking up in the room like I thought it was because of the amount of daylight coming through the window. But you'll see my buddy Braden here helping me hang the box. Him and his wife had stopped by with their new kiddo and were visiting with us for a little while, so he was giving me a hand while they were there. Like I said, if you look across here, if you can see through the dark video, like I said, I should have caught that earlier, but that box is higher than the left and the right. And once you see me install this trim and crown here, you'll see that it makes it all appear flush across there, but you actually have more storage on that box that's going from the left and the right side. Here I'm looking at the crown, and I could see that there was some issue spots with it that I didn't catch when I was in Home Depot. Imagine that. Again, you saw me working off the ground there. I work with what's easiest at the moment. I try not to overthink it too much, and that's just the way that I work. Like I said, some people might not like it. But here you can see that the 1x4 is truly straight all the way across, so it gives the appearance that everything's on that same height, but you still have a full 10 inches up inside of that box going above the top of the window. And then here I'm just going to put the crown up and get it all nailed in. So here, because that is flush in the corner, I added a little bit of a block to be able to catch my baseboard. You're seeing me trim some caulking off of that base because that was part of the base that came out. So I just was trying to clean it up before I installed it back. But that way that corner did not dip in on me, so I put a small block down in the bottom. But you can kind of see how it starts to give that illusion that it's truly one piece, that it was built in when the house was made or trimmed in when the house was made. Which just gives it that, built-in appearance that old saying. It's just, it looks like it was made that way. These are 1x2 sticks that I will trim out the face of pretty much all of the plywood with. I had to do a little bit of drywall work to the walls, just where some of the caulk lines were and nail holes and things, and I wanted to do that before I got on to painting it. And what I moved to from this spot, I guess you would say, is I go ahead and put the middle shelf in the cabinets. I spaced out a layout that I was going to be happy with, and I think it ended up being around 16 inches between shelving. But I go ahead and I put the middle shelf in the boxes to just make sure that my left and right bookcases are completely square. And then I would spend a fair amount of time going through and caulking all of the corners of all the boxes, and sanding the wall where I had touched up the drywall. I didn't figure you all probably wanted to watch any of that. It's like the old saying, it's about like watching paint dry. So wouldn't be very entertaining, but I did include just a little bit of where I had started to touch it up. What I'm painting in the corner here is I used what's called a cove mold to fill the void between where the drywall edge and the existing window trim and furring were, that kind of blended everything together. And then I spent a fair amount of time caulking out all of the gaps and the joints around the window. That's a big thing when you're doing a painted style of built-in with existing woodwork and things. It's a lot of prep. You're going to spend a lot of time caulking, sanding, touching up things to make it all look and appear nice and new and fresh and clean once you get it painted and completely done. Here I'm just facing out all of the rest of the shelves now that I'd gotten everything painted. I use a piece of shoe mold along the edge of the wall, shoot that in with my trim nailer, and then I use some more of those cabinet screws I was talking about to hold the shelf from the window side. The reason I did that was the trim nails that I had, I didn't want to risk puncturing out the side of the plywood where the window was at, so I felt like it was going to be a little bit stronger, so I used the trim screws from the side of the window to hold the shelving in. Here is where I start to figure out and lay out and cut the pieces that I'm going to utilize to make the bench that's going to go underneath of the window. All in all, I think I ended up with 4 sheets of this plywood, so around $200 in plywood to do the entire project, and I had several pieces left over. I don't remember exactly what I had spent in the other painted white primed one by. I think all in all total I only had around $400 in the project total. I had a decent amount of trim left from when I built the house that was already in the garage. The only thing I really didn't have was a lot of this 1x2. Here I stopped because I was trying to figure out that make sure I wasn't going to waste the sheet. These are going to be the ends of the bench that I'm cutting. So here you're going to see me use my vibrating saw, which is, I'm cutting that cove mold that I told you I put in to make that nice finished connection between my boxes and the previous trim around the window. So I cut those flush so that the left and right legs of the box are going to just slide in and fit in nice and tight. And then I just throw a couple more trim screws in it just to hold everything in. There was a hole in the floor below. You can probably see it just on the edge of the plywood. And this house never had, and if you ever watched the video where I replumbed the house, this house never had a shutoff, so I had to cut an access hole in the floor to reach the shutoff that I installed to shut the house water down. So what I ended up doing was cutting in a small 4x10 register in the floor. So all I ended up doing now that the built-in's in place was moving that out to the front edge of the built-in where I can still reach in there and get to the water main. Here the dog wanted to check out what I was doing, and he did not care for my drill at all, so it was kind of funny. He was barking. It's funny till it's not funny kind of thing. Also, the kids are in there checking out what I'm doing and asking questions and asking for snacks and turning on movies. And several episodes of Bluey were watched in the making of this video, we'll just say that. Here I'm just going to put a 2x4 along the bottom edge of the window to give support to the back edge that will make the top of the bench seat. Since there's no plywood there, I didn't see a need in wasting an entire sheet of plywood to go there just to basically never be seen. So I just use a piece of 2x underneath of the window and attach it to give me some area to fasten everything to once I start to put the top on and the piano hinge and everything else. So I decided to use a piece of 1x2 here. One, because it's the same thickness as the plywood that I'm using, and two, it's just everything's already nicely cut, finished. It's the right width, it's the right thickness. Instead of ripping down a piece of plywood and having a rough edge and all that, I use this 1x2, which will make the back area where the piano hinge is going to sit at. Here's one of my critics. No, she's great. She always is interested in what I'm doing and has a blast hanging out with me, and I always enjoy having her. So I'm just throwing in a cross block to help stiffen up the middle of the bench seat, and then these will be where the front edge of that top rests, basically where the joint's going to be, where the piano hinge meets that back piece of trim and the front of the bench. And I pre-planned out to leave myself about 1/8 of an inch of reveal all the way around that top. So that way, once it's mounted and I do all of the rest of my trim work, I've got a nice even gap all the way around this lid that will allow me to open it, and it's not rubbing the left and right cabinets or the trim that I'll end up facing out the bench with. Now I'm just going to throw a few screws in this piano hinge instead of putting all 9,000 of them in for the video anyways. I put in a few just so that I can operate the top and make sure everything's going to fit right. Test it out. Alright. Then I'm just going to place a small hole in the middle of it that you can put your finger in and open the top up, because we're gonna end up putting cushions across this top once it's done, and I didn't want anything protruding up. These are some of the trim pieces that I'm going to use to go ahead and completely trim out the rest of the cabinet. I think I used 1x3 on this top edge. That covers that rough edge of my plywood and gives me a nice clean finished look once it's all done. I started to videotape this, and then I realized you all probably didn't want to watch me put in 100 screws into this piano hinge, so I think I wound up stopping the video pretty quickly once I started to film this, because it was going to take me forever. And then I'm just extending and continuing the rest of that 1x6 baseboard across the front of it. Then I end up cutting a couple more pieces of 1x3. You'll see me measuring here, that I'm going to go ahead and trim the corners of the built-in, or the bench seat, I'm sorry, out with. I was having a hard time. I think I'd cut them too tight, and I wound up having to go back out a couple times and cut the height down on them. But I think it's just a nice way to trim out the corners and continue that one-by look. I may eventually go back, and I thought about it this week, of getting some base cap and going around that top, just to give it a extra little touch of trim, and even going along the insides of these two picture frame boxes that I make on the face of the bench as well. I thought about getting some base cap and going around the inside of them. I haven't really decided yet. I think every little step you add kind of just makes it pop that much more when you're doing these built-ins, but you also kind of have to gauge it with whatever your finished look is in your home. So here we have the completed built-in, and we are just extremely happy with how everything turned out. I would have loved to have had the shade open for this last shot, but it's full day sun and you can't see, obviously, from how the previous film footage came out. You can't see during the daylight on the camera how everything looks, but we love it, and we're still trying to get everything kind of positioned where we want on it, but we've been enjoying using it. The kids have been enjoying it, and it just made an awesome addition to the room. We sure appreciate everyone hanging out with us on today's video, and if you like these videos, please like and subscribe. We look forward to seeing you in the future. Take care and have a good day.